Okay, so this video is on passive transport. The last video was just transport in general, so this one is now on passive. Remember that passive transport does not require energy, so that would be like just an analogy, riding your bike downhill, a fish swimming with the current. No energy is required, so it's just a natural flow with the concentration gradient or down the concentration gradient. There are three types. Simple diffusion, which is just regular, movement of molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration. Then there is facilitated diffusion. If you think about facilitate, that means there's a helper there. And so in this case, the molecules still move from high to low, but they need help, and that help is a protein carrier. And then the last type of passive transport is osmosis, and we'll spend the most time talking about osmosis. Osmosis is still the movement from high to low, but it's referencing water. So the movement of water molecules from high to low. Okay, so if you think about a waterfall, it moves from high to low. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first one is simple diffusion. This is when molecules just move from a high concentration to a low concentration. And then in this case, this is just showing putting food coloring into water. Right here, the food molecules are, or the food coloring is very concentrated. There's a lot all in one spot. And you can see that there's none out here. So the molecules naturally want to move from a high concentration to a low concentration. And this is what the molecules look like in a drawing form. So there's a lot right here, high concentration, and then out here low. So they'll start bouncing off of each other until they become evenly distributed. This is called equilibrium. Now the reason molecules move around like that is because of a term called entropy. E-N-T-R-O-P-Y. Entropy. And I would like for you to spend some time looking up what entropy means so that you can explain why the molecules move around like this. Okay, again, this is simple diffusion. The next type is facilitated diffusion. And you can see in this picture, you have all these molecules up here. So there's a high concentration up here and a low concentration down here. Now they naturally would like to go from high to low, going straight through the membrane, just like my cursor is trying to show. But they can't. The membrane rejects them, so they get pushed away. But they really need to go across, so they have these protein carriers. These proteins are embedded in the cell membrane to allow things to go across when they need to. So this specific one is going to be unique to that shape. If there was like a triangular molecule out here, this would not work. Kind of like enzymes, they're very specific. Okay, so in this case, molecules move from high to low, but they need a protein carrier to help them. So this is called facilitated transport or facilitated diffusion. Again, no energy is required. No energy, so it's still a type of passive transport. If this molecule were able to go straight through the membrane, it would be called simple diffusion. But since it needs a carrier, it is called facilitated diffusion. It needs help getting from one side to another, and the protein helps with that. Okay, the last type of passive transport, this is another picture of facilitated transport. But the last type is osmosis. So again, osmosis is just like all of the other passive transports when it refers to molecules moving from a high concentration to a low concentration, but this time it's referencing water. Okay, so water moves from where there's a lot of water to where there's a little bit of water. Okay, so I'm going to show you these three pictures on my board. Okay, I know it's kind of hard to see, so I'll let you see the top two first. Let me move this down a little bit. Okay, so in these pictures, I'm going to start over here. The way I have drawn it is so that the clear space is water and the dots represent salt. Okay, so in this case, the outside, let's say it's a beaker of water, it has a lot of water, so I put high water, so there's a high percentage of water compared to salt. There's a very low amount of salt on the outside. But on the inside, there's a lot of salt and just a little bit of water, which I have labeled here. So low water, high salt. Well, according to osmosis, water moves from a high water concentration to a low water concentration. Well, that means that water is going to move, take the lid off my marker. Water is going to move from where there's a lot of water to where there's a little bit of water. So water is going to move into the cell. Okay, well, if water is moving into the cell, what's going to happen to the cell? Again, think about a water balloon. If you're pouring water into the balloon, it's going to expand. Well, when it does that, the cell is considered to be in a hypotonic solution. So this is a hypotonic solution. So you can kind of remember this with an O. If it's filling with water, it's going to get nice and plump, like a big O. Also, I like to think of a hippopotamus, right? Hippos are very big. Well, what's going to happen to the cell when you're pouring water into it? It's going to get big like a hippo. Okay? Now, sometimes this can result in cell bursting. If the cell bursts, that is called cytolysis. Okay, cytolysis. Cyto means cell. Lysis means to burst. Okay, so the cell goes through cytolysis, cell bursting. But plants cannot do that. Why can plants not do that? What do they have that animal cells do not? Think, think, think. They have a cell wall made up of cellulose. And remember, that's very, very strong. So what happens if we pretend now that this is the cell wall and this is maybe a vacuole that holds water? Water is filling up in there, but this wall is so strong that it does not burst open. Instead, pressure builds up. And that's what gives you, like if you eat celery, that's what makes the celery nice and crisp. Okay, this is called turgor pressure. So in a hypotonic solution, if you put a plant cell into a hypotonic solution, the cell gets full of water and creates turgor pressure, which makes the plant cell nice and rigid. Okay, so I'm going to put that up here because I'm running out of room on my board. So that's turgor pressure. Okay, and this is also why at grocery stores, when you're walking by, sometimes the water will start spraying out. The grocery stores are trying to create a hypotonic solution so that the plants, the celery, the lettuce, whatever you get from the produce section is going to be nice and crisp and have lots of turgor pressure, because nobody wants to buy vegetables that are all dried up. Okay, so that is a hypotonic solution. There's a higher amount of water on the outside than there is on the inside, and so water will move from a high water concentration to a low water concentration, causing the cells to swell. Okay, and that's what is talking about right here in the PowerPoint. So hypotonic solution, water moves into the cell causing swelling. It can cause cytolysis. It doesn't always, but it can. And then in plants it produces turgor pressure. Turgor pressure is what causes the plants to be rigid because it's full of water, but it just won't burst. All right, then the next situation, if you see here, this time it's a reverse situation. So the inside of the cell now has a high concentration of water. If you notice, there are very few dots in there. Remember, the dots are the salt. So on the inside, there's a high amount of water, a low amount of salt. On the outside, there's a low amount of water and a high amount of salt. Okay, so high water inside, low water outside. Water is going to move from high to low. So this time, the cell's going to lose water. And now the cell is going to shrink. It shrivels and shrinks. It's kind of like if you add salt or salt water to your vegetables. So what's going to happen to your vegetables? They're going to kind of shrivel up. They're going to kind of shrink away. That is when we say the solution is hypertonic. Okay, so that's hypertonic instead of hypotonic. And I don't have a really clever way of remembering this one. I kind of think of a hyperactive kid. That's somebody who's really small because they're always using lots of energy. So I kind of compare that to a person who has hyperactivity, because the cell gets small, it shrinks. Okay, kind of lame, I know, but that's what I did. Okay, so in this situation, again, water is moving from high to low, but this time water is leaving the cell and it causes it to shrivel and shrink. Well, that term is called plasmolysis. Okay, so it's like the cytoplasm is breaking down. It's moving out of the cell. Okay, so the cell is going to shrivel and shrink. Okay, and then again, that's what is written over here in the PowerPoint. Hypertonic solution, water moves out of the cell, causing the cell to shrink. And again, that's called plasmolysis. And then for the last one, down here, if you notice, the molecules are pretty evenly distributed all throughout. So if you have a high amount of water here compared to salt, you would have that same concentration inside. So instead of water moving in one direction, if water moves in, water then moves out. So it keeps it equal all throughout. If you have a cell that's in this type of solution, it is called iso, which means the same, so isotonic. Okay, and that's kind of how we want it to be. Okay, so you have three scenarios with osmosis. One where there is a higher concentration of water outside the cell than inside, and so water will move in, causing the cell to swell. That's a hypotonic solution. The next situation is where you have a low amount of water on the outside, a high amount on the inside, so water will move out, causing the cell to shrink, and that is called a hypertonic solution. And then the last one is where you have an equal distribution of molecules compared to water, and so that is called isotonic. Water will move in and water will move out. Okay, so that is your three examples of passive transport. So let's go through it one more time. So you have simple diffusion, over here. Simple diffusion, where molecules just move straight across the membrane from high to low, no energy required. Then you have facilitated diffusion. Molecules move from high to low, but they need a transporter, a protein carrier. Still moving high to low, no energy required. And then your third type is osmosis. Osmosis is still movement from high to low, but it's in reference to water. So water molecules move from where there's a lot of water to where there's a little bit of water. And there are three scenarios there. You can have a hypotonic solution where water moves into the cell, causing it to swell. Then you can have a hypertonic solution where water leaves the cell, causing it to shrivel and shrink. And then you have an isotonic solution where water moves into and out of the cell. Okay, and that allows the cell to maintain equilibrium in that case. Okay, so let me give you just a quick example, and you guys try to figure out whether or not it is hypotonic, hypertonic, or isotonic. So I'm going to pretend I got a fish from the carnival. You know how those last so well. It's a freshwater fish, and I decide to put it into a saltwater tank. So I'm going to draw that. So here is my scenario. Okay, so I want to know if I put this fish in a hypotonic solution or a hypertonic solution. So again, you kind of have to think about the amount of water. Well, if this is a saltwater tank, that means that the concentration of the water is low compared to the salt. Okay, so that means I have low water. Okay, well, the fish is a freshwater fish, which means it's not used to salt. So that means it has a high amount of water compared to salt. So this has a high amount of water. So remember, with osmosis, water moves from a high water concentration to a low water concentration. So in that case, water will move out of the fish. The poor little fish is going to shrivel and shrink. And that means the fish was put into I think you guys all got it, I hope anyway, hypertonic solution. Okay, because the cell is shriveling up and shrinking. Okay, so I hope this helps on passive transport. Again, three types: simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Next videos will be on active transport and bulk transport.